Oh god, this one. Okay.
Didn't I make you laugh? Didn't I make you smile?
Hi friends, it's Rory, and today is another month, which means another wrap up. Now, for the month of March, I only read middle grade books, and I read 6 books. I had a little bit of a reading slump halfway through this month. I just could not find it in me to read, and I think it was because I had read so much in the previous months, and also because Animal Crossing came out. So, up front, I do want to let everyone know how I rate middle grade books differently than how I rate other books. When it comes to reading books meant for younger people, I always look at them in the context of, would I myself want my niece, specifically my niece Nella, who is 7, would I want her to read this book? And so I am in some ways easier on middle grade books than I am on other books, but in some ways I'm harder on them, because when it comes to books that I want my niece to read, I want her to become a good person, and so things that I think are troubling or not handled the best way may end up in a lower score overall than if I saw the same thing in, say, a book that I was reading for myself that was for my age range. Simply because I, as an adult, am able to see that that is troubling behavior. Not to say that, like, anything troubling is not, allowed, just it needs to be explained that that behavior is incorrect explicitly in order for me to kind of give it a pass, if that makes sense. Like, I want the books that I recommend for my niece to be books that will help her in the long run become more empathetic, more of a good person, things like that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the first book I read this month was Star-Crossed by Barbara D. This is the story of a girl named Maddie who is in 8th grade, and she is about to be part of her 8th grade class's performance of Romeo and Juliet. But due to circumstances that happen in the book, she ends up playing Romeo, and she is also starting to get a crush on the girl who is playing Juliet, who is named Gemma. So I gave this book 5 stars. It was really, really good. It was super duper cute the entire time, but also this book high-key almost made me cry, and I teared up several times for it, because there were conversations and like things that the main character Maddie would do that reminded me so much of myself when I was her age. There are no labels in this because Maddie is 12 and therefore is just figuring out herself. But if I was going to preemptively label her, I would say that Maddie is a bisexual girl. She does talk about a crush that she used to have on a boy in the beginning of this, and then she talks about her crush that she has on the girl playing Juliet, whose name is Gemma. And just as a person who is bisexual myself, I felt very connected to Maddie in this. There were things that she was thinking and things that she was saying and things that she was doing that I thought and said and did. I first heard about Star-Crossed from Tumblr. There was a post from Barbara D's daughter where she talked about coming out as bisexual to her mother when she was a teenager, and her mom being very supportive of that, and then a couple years later she ended up writing this book. That was years ago. I've been wanting to read this book for years, and it did not disappoint. It was so cute. Yeah, I felt very connected to this. I think it's really good representation, explained but not in your face. You know what I'm saying? The girl Maddie talks about how she doesn't want people to know about her crush on Gemma because people might make fun of her, and it's explained. All of her feelings on that are explained, and it's very, very you know, easy to understand where that anxiety comes from. And then her friend says that she understands that, but also Maddie needs to be able to let her own emotions out. And I was like, yes, T, you go, Lucy, who is the name of the friend. So anyways, I gave this 5 stars. It's really, really cute. And I'm definitely, when my niece gets to the age where this is the type of book that she would be reading, I will definitely be recommending it to her. Up next, I listened to the audiobook of the first Kane Chronicle by Rick Riordan. Now, I am a huge Rick Riordan fan. I would consider him one of my favorite authors. I've read every Percy Jackson book. I read every Heroes of Olympus book. I have read every Trials of Apollo book. I've read every Magnus Chase book. In fact, they're my favorite Rick Riordan books. I fucking love the Magnus Chase series, but I never read the Kane Chronicles. They never interested me when I was younger. I didn't really like Egypt. I was more into Greek and Roman stuff, and that's why I liked Percy Jackson. And I regret it now because this was a really fun book to read. Basic plot, there are 2 siblings, Carter and Sydney, and their dad is taken from them, and they have to save him from the Egyptian god Set. I ended up giving this a 3.5. It was good, but it definitely had one of those, it felt like an earlier Rick Riordan book, if you know what I'm saying, which is understandable because the Kane Chronicles was his second series. I definitely think I will enjoy the other ones more. This had a very much beginning, like, first book of the series feel to it, and it took me a little while to understand some things because I'm not, you know, educated on Egyptian culture, but all of the things that were explained were made easy to understand, which is very, very good because Egyptian history can be very, very complicated, and Egyptian mythology can be very complicated. So that's good. I feel very, very connected to Carter. I related a heck of a lot to him, especially his feelings on feeling like he's not brave, but desperately needing to protect his sister. There was also one line in it that I have never felt more, because I used to live in Pensacola and go to school in Pensacola, but my family is from an hour north of Orlando, and I used to have to drive from my parents' home to Pensacola, and so I am very well acquainted with I-10, and there was a line where Carter's is just like, you get to tell them about the land of the dead, and I get to tell them about the trip on I-4. Let me just summarize it for you. It was long and it was boring, and I felt that. I felt that so hardcore. My biggest issue with the book, besides that the beginning can be a little bit hard to understand what's going on, is the ages, specifically Sadie's. She has kind of like a crush on the god Anubis, which is fine, and because I know things about what happened in the series later on, I kind of already, you know, saw what was going on. The thing is, Sadie's 12, and Anubis is described as being like a late teenager, like 16, 17-ish. It made me uncomfortable a little bit. It wouldn't have made me uncomfortable if I was 12 when I was first reading it, because definitely 12-year-olds think that they're, you know, so mature. So Sadie was just like, I'm mature for my age, and that's fine, understandable. All 12-year-olds feel that way. But as an adult, it's kind of a little bit suspect, and it's a bit weird, and it made me uncomfortable. Sometimes the things that she was saying, and I was like, you're 12. You're 12. It would have made me personally more comfortable if she was 14 and Carter was 16. And Anubis was the same fucking age. It's not a bad thing for her to be 12 and have a crush on the 16-year-old. It's him kind of a little bit flirting back. That's the weird thing. I will say that one fantastic thing is he was not pulling punches. There is a part where Carter talks about how he dresses nicely because he his dad told him that if you don't look nice as a black man, you're more likely to get stopped, you're more likely to get questioned. And along with that, both Carter and Sadie are mixed. Their mother is white and their father is black. And they both look like their parents in that Carter looks like a black boy and Sadie looks like a white girl. The thing is, they are both mixed race, but the way that people react to them is very much different, and it's explicitly stated. And it's not only stated by Carter, but it's stated by Sadie, which is very, very important in my opinion, that Sadie sees the privilege and is the one that's getting mad at it. So that was one of my favorite things. Like, I'm talking, I was like, damn, son. Let's get it with properly showing the colorism and the racism of the world in a way that children can understand and they can start to learn. So yes, 3.5-ish stars. I have a feeling that I'm going to enjoy the rest of them more. Up next, I read The School for Good and Evil. I started out with the ebook, and then I ended up moving over to the audiobook. But here's the thing. Okay, so I gave this book 2 stars. And I would not recommend it to my niece, and here is why. So, the story of The School for Good and Evil is there are 2 girls. There's Sophie and Agatha. And they are from a town where every 4 years, 2 children get taken. One for the School for Evil and one for the School for Good. Most of the children that are taken do not want to be taken. They do not want to be taken. Sophie, however, does want to be taken. She knows that she is going to go for the School of Good, and she wants her friend Agatha to go for the School of Evil. Now, the reason is because Agatha wears black clothes. She looks like a stereotypical villain. She's mean to people. Or like she's not mean to people. She's rude to people when they treat her badly. She feels like she is the perfect person for the School for Evil. And so she is trying to get taken. Agatha doesn't want to be taken. She thinks that she's fine. She's there. She's got her cat and she's got her friend Sophie. They do end up being taken, but twist here. Agatha ends up in the School for Good and Sophie ends up in the School for Evil. That sounds so good. Like, that sounds great, but I hated almost every character in this book except for Agatha, and even that changed at the end. This is one of those books where you get to a certain point and you're like, am I only continuing this for one character? And the answer is yes. I freaking love Agatha. She was the only person, I said this to my roommate while I was reading. I was like, every person in this book has one brain cell and Agatha has it at all times. But then in the last like 5 chapters, she just straight up lost the brain cell, and this is a series, and at first when Agatha was being the way that when she was great and I liked her, I was like, am I going to continue this series just because I love Agatha? And the answer is no, I'm not going to continue this series. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, it's just there was a lot of talk about how looking pretty, it makes you good and looking ugly makes you bad. And even though Agatha's character, she's supposed to look ugly. She's supposed I'm not saying ugly. She's supposed to look like a villain. So that would make people think that she's ugly. And there is even a point, which was very good, where she herself is talking about how she's ugly to a teacher. And the teacher is like, what did you think of this character when you first met her? Or first saw her? And she's like, she's beautiful. And it's like, okay, well, what do you think of her now? She's horrible. Yes, but does that make her less beautiful? No. So beauty isn't good. And that part was great. But then right after that, she becomes pretty, and it seems like it seems like everything's fine. Like, she becomes the main girl, and I'm just, you can't have that type of situation and not make it seem like being pretty is what makes you good. You see? And on the opposite side, when Sophie got kind of bad, like got worse, she started to turn ugly. Make it make sense. And that's the other thing, is that the school for evil was talking about how being ugly makes you powerful and makes you a better villain. And I was just reading this and I was like, but some of the best villains are not ugly. In fact, they're very, very beautiful. For example, the evil queen from Snow White. She's the most beautiful girl in the land, with the exception of Snow White, and that's why she gets so jealous and she tries to kill her. The only time she's ugly is when she has a glamour on that makes her look like an old woman. Like, make it make sense. And then there was the main love interest, who for half of it was with Sophie and then was just like, oh wait, I never wanted to be with Sophie. I wanted to be with Agatha the entire time. And they went from not having a relationship to like very much having a relationship within like one chapter. Make it make sense. And furthermore, he was fucking awful. Like, he was the worst. Like, he kept joking about how Sophie and Agatha were girlfriends, and I was like, that's the moment that I hated him. Because the first time that he was there, I was like, back before I decided that I hated all the characters, I was like, oh, are we gonna get a hate to love romance between him and Agatha? Sorry if there's a camera change. I filmed this entire video, took it off, and then realized that I got something that stopped my recording halfway through, so let's continue. I was on... I'm so upset because there was so much goodness. So at first, I liked... I wanted them to get together, but then they were just, like... awful. Agatha and the guy whose name, it's not Terrence, but I kept thinking it was Terrence. Anyways, I didn't like School for Good and Evil, and I wouldn't recommend it to my niece because there's girl hate. I would not recommend it for my niece. And it sucks because I know a lot of people who really, really love this first book. Like, I watched back a long time ago, I watched videos where there was like a readathon where this was a main book, or maybe it was like a buddy read situation where like 7 booktubers read this book and a whole bunch of them loved it, and I just hated it. I hated it so much. So yeah, am I going to continue this? Absolutely not. I only liked one character, which was Agatha, and even in the end I ended up not really liking Agatha. Or not that I didn't like Agatha, but I didn't like the changes that they made in Agatha. I think it would have been so much better if this book, first of all, didn't make beauty being a thing. Like, didn't make Agatha getting better and accepting herself as turning beautiful. If she still looked the same way she looked before, but people just accepted her because she was a good person. I don't know. Up next is Tunnel of Bones, which is the second Cassidy Blake book by Victoria Schwab. I gave this book 5 stars. I gave the first one 3 stars. I really enjoyed it. It definitely had a first book feel. There was a lot of setup, which kind of sucks because it feels like a lot of like first books of a series are so much setup, and that ends up lowering their ranking overall. Cassidy Blake is the story of a girl named Cassidy Blake, obviously, who a little bit over a year ago almost died in a river. Actually, I think she died but was brought back. And ever since then she can see ghosts. So she has a best friend, Jacob, who I freaking love, who is a ghost, and she has the ability to go into the veil, and which is where ghosts reside, and kind of like see what's going on. So in the last book, it was discovered she can help send ghosts on to the other side, and also, she made a friend who let her know that her ghost friend Jacob needed to be sent on, and that the longer he was around, the more powerful he was gonna get. And this is where this book gets fantastic, because Jacob and Cassidy in this book were the best dang things ever, especially Jacob. I already love Jacob from the first book. He's great, he's sarcastic, he's one of those like people where the main character is a Gryffindor and she explicitly states that she is a Gryffindor, and he is just like, I really, really hate everything about this, but I'm gonna do it anyways because you're my best friend. He's like the reluctant sidekick. I fucking love it so much. But along with that, there was talks, because she was so worried about him becoming more powerful and becoming evil, that took a large precedent of the story, and it's directly addressed by him. And also, I like the ghost a lot more in this one than I liked in the first one. It's really, really sad, the ghost story that happened in this one. But along with that, it's set in Paris, and I really, really like Paris. Like, the first one is set in Edinburgh, Scotland, which I know every single, like, person from England just, like, raised their fists at my accent for that, I know. But, this one takes place in Paris, which I think is a more kind of, like, interesting city, no offense. I love this so much because of the Jacob-Cassidy relationship in this book. And I'm really, really, really happy that this is a series that kids can grow up on. Like, I believe there's going to be another one this year. One second, let me look. Every 2 years. Yes, the next one is supposed to be Bridge of Souls, and it's expected in 2021. But yeah, it's a really good kids book, or like kids series. It's really, really interesting, and I definitely recommend it, especially the second one. It's fantastic. I love it so much. And Jacob is my favorite character. Also, you find out how Jacob died in this book, and like, it makes me, I high-key almost cried. And by high-key, I mean very high-key. I had like teared up eyes. I was about to start crying. Up next, we have Hurricane Child by Karen Callender. And I gave this book 2.5 stars. I don't know why I don't like this book. I can explain it a little bit, but I should like this book. So this book is about a girl named Caroline, and about a year ago her mother disappeared, and she desperately wants to find her mother. And a girl named Kalinda joins her school, and she ends up getting a bit of a crush on Kalinda, but her and Kalinda are working on finding her mother. The things when it comes to relationships in middle grade books is that I know that kids fall in love very quickly. Very quickly. And so while I like the slower burn romances, especially for middle grade series, just like Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase, they only kissed in the Labyrinth book, which is the 4th book in the series, and they only became a relationship in the 5th book. And that made sense, because the 1st book they are 11, and the 5th book they're 16, and it makes sense that around 15 you start to really, really develop, around 13 you start to really, really develop that crush. And then 15 and 16, they're there. I love that relationship because it's slow. But I know in real life, children fall in love really, really quickly. High schoolers fall in love really, really quickly, which is why insta love in YA can be a thing, and I get it, and I get it. But this one, it was like Kalinda came to the school, they weren't friends. Then Caroline and her became friends, and then like 2 chapters later, Caroline, after Kalinda directly insulted a lesbian couple and said that they were disgusting, Caroline was suddenly like, I love her. And I was just like, do you though? Do you really? And it's just like, I never saw why, because like they were friends for such a short time before she was talking about how she was in love with her. I don't know. Especially this book is very short, but along with that, this is large print, so it's even shorter than it actually seems to be. And it just I didn't like the relationship, and I don't know why, because I understand why it's so fast, but at the same time it wasn't developed enough, in my opinion. And then another thing that I had to take off points for is that there's talk and terms in here that if a child doesn't understand, you know, what they mean, this book could be very, very confusing. And so if I'm looking at it like I'm recommending a book for a 11, 12-year-old child, they need to be very educated on terms and like specifically slavery. There are lots of mentions of slavery in this, which I personally love. We need to talk about slavery, and children need to read books that directly deal with slavery so that they understand what happened, why it was wrong, things like that. But there is a certain level of education that needs to be done in order to understand what is going on with this book. You feel me? And I can't guarantee that, you know, every child is going to have that education in order to get it. I can hope so, but I can't for sure say it. Here's the thing about this though. I really, really like the mother storyline. And I feel like if there was more development and more, and it made a little bit more sense with the romance, this could have been a 3.5 4-star read. Something about this book I didn't click with, which sucks so much because I was so excited to read this book. I was so excited. I've heard raving reviews about this book. It has been on the lookout for a long time. This was one of the books that I knew for a fact I wanted to read when I was only reading middle grades. And I just didn't connect with it, or there was something that made me not like it. But luckily, we finished the month on a strong note. A couple of days ago, I had to drive to St. Augustine and back for something. Naturally, went alone because self-quarantining. And I listened to this audiobook there and back, and I finished it before I got home. And it was so good. It was so good. So the book is 910, A September 11th Story by Nora Riley Baskin. And I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is the story of 4 teenagers who are in the Chicago airport on the same day on September 9th. And it follows their lives for the next couple of days until September 11th, where each of their lives are changed in some way or other because of how they are directly affected by 9/11. Nadira, who is a Muslim girl in Ohio, and she is starting to kind of like get questions she's not entirely comfortable with. Like people keep asking her about her hijab, and she's no longer really comfortable with it, whereas before she would, you know, explain what it was. Now she's just like, I don't want people to ask me. I don't want to be different. Then there is Sergio, who lives in Brooklyn, and he has an absentee father, and he was in the airport because he just won a math contest and was flying back. And then there's Amy, whose mother just got a new job in LA, and she is moving to LA, and in fact the 10th is her first school day in her new school, but her mother has a work trip in New York, and her mother works in banking. And then there is Will, whose father died a year ago in a accident, and he and his family were just given a trip to Disney, and they're flying back to their town in Pennsylvania, which is just outside where the 4th plane went down in the field. The reason I gave it 4.5 instead of 5 stars is that once again, like Hurricane Child, there is a certain level of education that needs to be done in order to feel how emotional this book is. Like, to get the emotional impact. So, Sergio skips school on the 10th, and he meets and becomes friends with a man named Gabriel, who is a firefighter. And the second he said that he was a New York firefighter, my heart dropped into my stomach. I was like, oh my gosh. You need to understand the amount of firefighters that lost their lives on 9/11 to understand the emotional, like, feeling that you have when he says he's a firefighter. Specifically, he says that he originally had Tuesday off, but his friend at work, his anniversary is the 10th, and so he shifts with him so that he would be working on the 11th. And it's just, oh my gosh. Not that that matters, because a whole bunch of firefighters who were off on September 11th ended up going into work and help. Then there is Amy, and if you don't know what the World Trade Center was, then you won't understand how your heart drops when she says that her mother works in banking, and specifically her mom says that she has a meeting at 9 a.m. in the World Trade Center. And once again, my heart dropped, and I was like, oh my gosh. There were a lot of emotions. I spent a large majority of this book with my heart in my stomach and just so much nervousness and worry. I'm not going to say what happens with each of these characters because I really, really want people to read this book. It's so good. I listened to the audiobook. It was fantastic. The narrator was so good, and I listened to it on Scribd. So if you have Scribd, please, I beg you, it will take you, if you listen to it on 1.5, it'll take you 3 hours to listen to, but it is so good. Another reason why it only has 4.5 stars is there's a time skip from September 11th, 2001 to September 11th, 2002. And I really wish there was a little bit more information on the direct aftermath of the things that happen for the kids. Just, there's a little bit of like a explanation in the time skip, but I really wish I could have seen it. And that's the personal thing. Other than that, this book was so fantastic. All of the characters, I felt their struggles. I felt all of them. And once again, there's that feeling of knowing something bad is going to happen where the characters don't. And just, I cried in this book. I burst into tears at one point because of something that happened. I was so emotional for it. And yeah, 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's such a good book. I have a feeling it's going to end up popping up on my best of 2020 list at the end of the year. That is the 6 books that I read in March. Now, I'm no longer only reading middle grade books. However, next month is probably going to have a lot of middle grade books still, because I checked out a fair number because I've been reading more, and my library is closed, and I don't have to turn them in until May 1st, and I really enjoyed reading middle grade books this month. I think middle grade is great, especially I think it's so good, the type of diverse stories that middle grade has right now. Just like, I didn't get to grow up with that, and I'm so happy that my nieces and nephews get to grow up in a world where these books are an option for them. As always, I hope that you guys had a great time with me today. There's a link down below to where you can register to vote. If you just turned 18, make sure that you go ahead and register before the deadline for the election in November. And I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye!